and let us all do we can to build a better future. So, Daniel, you talk a lot about infrastructure. You know that, right?
Very important.
I mean, it's very important. But here's the thing. It's important to us all. But sadly and unfortunately, it seems that this infrastructure bill that was passed in the Senate, while it is $1 trillion, it's being touted as a major victory for Biden. So let's find out what's exactly happening with this wonderful infrastructure package that we got, or that was passed. So the Senate on Tuesday passed a roughly $1 trillion bipartisan infrastructure deal, a significant win for Joe Biden, and the first step on his top legislative priority. Senators voted 69-30 on the bill, which was spearheaded by a bipartisan group of senators led by Senators Kristen Sinema, oh my God, curtsy thumbs down, and Robert Portman, and 19 GOP senators voted with all Democrats to pass the legislation. The bill is now heading to the House, where it faces an uncertain future and skepticism from progressives. Speaker Nancy Pelosi has vowed she won't take it up until the Senate passes the second part of its infrastructure two-step, a sweeping $3.5 trillion spending package that includes Democrats' top priorities. But the Senate's passage of the bipartisan measure on Tuesday gives a victory for Biden and the centrist-minded group that led the legislation and placed big bets and months of time on the ability to get a bipartisan deal on infrastructure, one of Washington's long-running legislative white whales. Congress has talked about truly modernizing our nation's infrastructure for as long as we can remember. And mind you, as they're saying that, I mean, our infrastructure has been updated in decades, whereas the rest of the world has been continuously investing into their people, into their local economies, into their infrastructure, and we are stagnant. We have nothing here in this country. Our entire system is decades old, and our stuff is being held together. And look, maybe I'm being generous with this statement, but with duct tape, glue, and clothing wire, and that's it. That's it. Our infrastructure is just that, crumbling, and we're just using the bare minimum to keep it working. Continuing on, the United States Senate delivered so that we can finally give the American people the safe, reliable, and modern infrastructure they deserve, Portman, Sinema, and the 8 other senators who were the core negotiators said in a joint statement after the vote. And underscoring the bill's importance to the administration, Vice President Kamala Harris presided over the vote, even though she wasn't needed to break the tie. So she only shows up when she's not really that needed.
Oh, it's amazing. All the times that everything that all the established people need, you don't need them. Then anytime it's a $15 minimum wage progressive, all of a sudden, the secretary of the vice president is needed.
So the bipartisan deal includes roughly $550 billion in new funding, making it substantially smaller than the $2.6 trillion proposed by Biden earlier this year. It includes money for new investments for infrastructure projects like roads, bridges, broadband, water, rail. According to the Congressional Budget Office, the CBO, analyzes that the bill would add $256 billion to the deficit, though negotiators argued that hard infrastructure projects pay for themselves over time and that the CBO didn't give them full credit for their work. So now let's look at this big issue problem that we have with this infrastructure package. And that is, it's not enough to really invest into our country.
And it's privatizing a lot of stuff, and it's using funding from other sources that they're going to probably need it, but now they won't have it, and so that money, this is exactly what we have. I just heard this saying a couple days ago. The answer is elephant. The question is how to build a mouse by committee in the U.S.
Well, Dan, here's the thing, though. Now it has an uncertain future in the House. But even then, the House, they're not even going to fight for it. Let's look at our legislative leaders. Now, I know. People are going to say, well, wait, here's where Harlan's media starts being disrespectful to the Democratic lawmakers. But the sad fact is, we know what the GOP is going to do. Now, somehow, the centrist, pragmatic Democrats in the Senate got 19 Republican lawmakers in the U.S. Senate to go along with it because for them it met their appeasement. $1 trillion. Oh, whoop-de-doo. But it won't do crap for our country. At the bare minimum, Daniel, correct me if I'm wrong, we really need $10 trillion at the bare minimum, just scratching that surface, and that's it.
That's to get everything up and running. Also, another reason is that they're privatizing and turning over, what do they call it, recycling, a bunch of public assets and selling them off as private. But again, it's $1 trillion is like enough to I don't know, probably fix the infrastructure in like California. That's like the size of the budget we're talking about. I mean, maybe not even all of California, just like
Some parts of it.
most of it, 80% of it can be fixed with $1 trillion. And yeah, it's like infrastructure is the thing that made America really powerful, really big, able to sustain everything that our empire produced, everything our empire brought in. That's all dying off. There used to be a time when I think like 5% of the budget went to infrastructure. Now it's like less than like is given to NASA.
Yeah.
It's a disgrace. Everything's falling apart, and these yahoos think that putting $1 trillion in is going to make a difference, especially when it turns out a lot of it's going to just be privatizing public works anyway.
Again, here's another thing we have to look at when it comes down to its future in the House. These now again, here's where I have to be critical of our Democratic lawmakers. How much are they willing to put up a fight to fight for those progressive promises or those Democratic promises that they promised their constituents throughout the entire 2020 general election? How much are they willing to fight for everything that they said, or are we just going to see them constantly compromise and we're going to watch that $3.5 trillion that Speaker of the House Nancy wants get dwindled down to 2.5 to 1.5, maybe to 1 trillion,
Or not pass.
or not pass at all?
And then
Will the squad raise a ruckus, or will they be outside at the last minute, then running right back inside the assembly room, just as Nancy's going to call for an adjourning of the entire House? I mean, this is again, when we look at our political leaders, we're not getting anything, and they're not willing to fight for us. They're not willing to raise the ruckus. They're not willing to shake the apple cart and challenge those in power. And because they're not willing to do that, I have to say, what are you going to use to convince voters to turn out for you in 2022? What, Trump's bad? Orange man bad? Well, we get that. But people are starving. People are at risk of being kicked out of their homes. And our infrastructure all across this country is falling apart. Is that it? Just assume everything's going to be fine and just use the bare minimum? Daniel?
Yeah, I mean, we know that they're not going to do anything. Like, they keep saying they'll do something. Bernie Sanders will say, "Oh, I'll do something to stop it." Then he won't. He'll doormat. The squad will, get late to a meeting and, "Oh, no, we couldn't do it." Man, I still think it was just one of the most pathetic things ever that, in their own words, they missed the most important meeting on the day that they knew the meeting was happening because they were late to do it. I think that's even, if that is still their answer, that's more pathetic than intentionally not doing it, because you're not saying, "Hey, I could have done something and I didn't." You're saying, "I am so incompetent, I did not remember the last day of session." So these are the people that we have to rely on for that separate package to get passed. I'm holding my breath. Hey, I'll say if I'm wrong, if it does pass or something happens and it's not an obvious disaster. But we've been burned so many times by this exact same process with these exact same people in the exact same way. And all the other times it's happened, they've gone basically and condescended to us for asking too much. At what point will people recognize that the Democratic Party is not worth fighting for?